The GPS said 2 hours and 40 minutes when my neighbor called. I was on I-40 westbound, somewhere in the long stretch across the Cumberland Plateau, halfway through a thermos of gas station coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost did. Shane. Marge Dunning never called me by my first name. In 11 years of living across from her on Birchwood Court, she'd always been formal, polite, the kind of neighbor who waves from the driveway and brings over banana bread at Christmas. Shane, you need to come home right now. Something is very wrong. I pulled over on the shoulder before she finished the sentence. She told me she'd been deadheading her roses along the back fence when she heard Ruby crying. Not the crying of a child who skinned her knee. The other kind. The kind that goes on until the voice gives out and all that's left is a sound like an animal caught in something it can't get free from. Marge said she looked through the gap in the fence and saw the curtains drawn on the house, saw Gloria's minivan in the driveway, alongside 2 cars she didn't recognize. Then she heard laughter from somewhere inside. Adult laughter. I opened my security app before she finished talking. I have 4 cameras in my house. I installed them 8 months ago, after Ruby came home from a weekend with my wife's family, with a bruise on her shoulder that Amy explained as a fall from the porch steps. Ruby told me very quietly, while Amy was in the other room, that Aunt Gloria had grabbed her. I didn't know exactly what to do with that information yet. I was a logistics specialist in the Army for 9 years. I know how to document. I know how to build a case before I move. So I set up cameras, backed the footage up to 3 separate cloud servers, and I waited. What I saw on my phone screen while I sat on that highway shoulder, with tractor trailers blasting past me at 70 miles an hour. I have played it back in my mind every single day since, and it still takes my breath away. The hall closet under the stairs. The door is closed. A chair has been pushed under the handle from the outside. On the audio, I can hear Ruby's muffled voice through the door. The AC unit is off. I can tell because the vent fan that always hums in that hallway is completely silent. It was 92 degrees in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, that afternoon. Gloria is sitting on the bottom step, 6 feet from that door, holding a glass of white wine. Her husband Bart is against the wall with his phone out, filming the closet door like it's a nature documentary. 3 of Amy's cousins are scattered around the living room, and Amy, my wife, the mother of my daughter, is standing at the kitchen counter with her back to the closet, refilling her own glass, saying something I can hear clearly through the camera's tiny microphone. She'll settle down eventually. She always does when she figures out nobody's coming. Gloria laughed at that. How long has it been? 45 minutes, Bart said. My money's on another 20 before she just gives up completely. I sat in my truck and watched that footage for exactly 11 seconds. That's how long it took me to absorb what I was looking at. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to my brother Kyle. Kyle lives in Brentwood, 20 minutes from my house. Get to my house right now, I told him. Don't knock. Spare key is under the 3rd flower pot on the left. Ruby is locked in the hall closet under the stairs. Get her out. I heard him stand up from whatever he was sitting in. I heard his keys jingle. The second call was to Rex Harmon. Rex and I served together at Fort Campbell. He'd spent years in intelligence work he still won't discuss in any detail, and when he got out, he built a career in private security and forensic documentation. I'd helped him through some things a few years back, and he'd told me he owed me. I need you at my house in Murfreesboro, I said. Bring everything. He didn't ask a single question. Then I pulled back onto I-40 and I drove. I should tell you about Amy, because none of what happened that day makes sense without understanding how we got there. We met when we were both 22. She was sharp and funny, and the kind of person who made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. We got married 2 years later. Ruby wasn't planned, but when Amy held her in the hospital for the first time, she cried and told me Ruby was the best thing that had ever happened to her. I believed her. For years I believed her. Things started shifting after Amy's mother passed away 3 years ago. Her mother left behind a $580,000 life insurance payout and a rental property in Clarksville. Amy's name was on the policy as primary beneficiary, but the original intent, which her mother had stated clearly to all of us more than once, was for a significant portion to be placed in an education trust for Ruby. Amy and I had agreed on this together. We'd met with a financial advisor. The trust paperwork was in my filing cabinet, ready to be signed. Amy stopped returning the financial advisor's calls the following January. Around the same time, I started noticing other things. A bank account she'd opened without mentioning it. Frequent trips to visit her sister Gloria and Bart in Knoxville that always seemed to coincide with my work travel. The way she started actively encouraging me to take longer assignments, including the one that had me staying in Knoxville for the better part of a week, auditing a manufacturing facility's safety protocols, which was exactly what I was doing the day Marge called. I wasn't blind. I was assembling a picture. The cameras were part of that. Gloria had never liked me. She thought Amy had married beneath her. A logistics guy from a working-class background in Cookeville who'd done his time in the service and come home to work for a regional manufacturing company. Bart disliked me for a simpler reason. I had a steady income and a house and a retirement account, and he had none of those things. He'd been out of work for nearly 2 years. They were renting a place they could barely afford. Amy had been quietly sending them money. I found that out the same month I found out about the separate account. But I still hadn't imagined the chair under the door handle. I turned onto Birchwood Court at 4:51 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I checked my phone the second I made the turn, some automatic military habit, still logging data. Marge was standing on her front porch. She pointed toward my house and pressed her hand over her heart, and I understood that meant Ruby was out. 2 Rutherford County Sheriff's cruisers were parked in front. A third was pulling up as I stepped out of my truck. Marge had called 911 at the same time she called me. Kyle was sitting on my front steps with Ruby in his lap. Ruby had a blanket around her shoulders despite the heat. Her face was blotchy, and her hair was pressed flat to the side of her head. When she spotted my truck, she said something I couldn't hear from that distance, but I could read her mouth, and I started running before I'd fully decided to. "Daddy," she said it like it was the only word left in the world. I held her on those front steps for a long time. She was shaking, that deep involuntary shaking that happens after a body has been frightened past its own limit. Her hands were gripping my shirt so hard I could feel her nails through the fabric. She smelled like heat and cedar and dust. "You're out," I kept saying into her hair. "You're out. I've got you." She pulled back and looked at my face, checking it the way children check a parent's face when they need to know if the danger is truly over. "They said you weren't coming back," she said. "Aunt Gloria said you and Mommy were getting rid of me." That sentence lives inside me now, 7 years old, getting rid of me. Behind me I could hear Bart being loud about his constitutional rights. Gloria was crying, the showy kind that doesn't involve actual tears. Amy was somewhere I couldn't see from the steps, and I was glad for that, because I didn't trust myself to be near her yet. Rex had arrived before me. He'd photographed the interior of the house before the deputies touched anything. The chair still wedged under the closet door handle, the AC thermostat turned off, the wine glasses, Bart's phone lying face down on the hallway floor where he'd dropped it when Kyle came through the door. Rex had also pulled the cloud backup of my security footage and was already transmitting it to the investigating officers through a chain of custody protocol he knew from his intelligence work. He knew how to make sure nothing could be challenged in court later. That was the point. Sergeant Brower from the sheriff's department shook my hand and told me what the charges would look like. He was calm and professional, and I could see in his face that he was quietly furious. The hospital documented everything. Dr. Yoon in the children's emergency department was methodical and deliberate. Elevated core temperature, dehydration, moderate. No acute physical injuries. She went through Ruby's examination the way a person goes through it when they understand that what they're writing will be read in a courtroom. She also told me, in a very low voice while Ruby was occupied with a nurse who'd brought her a popsicle, that there were faded bruises on Ruby's upper arm and lower back, each at a different stage of healing. "Some of these are weeks old," she said. "I'm a mandated reporter. This is already in the system." I sat with Ruby while she worked through her popsicle and told me about the closet. She described it the way children describe frightening things, matter-of-factly, without melodrama, because they haven't learned yet to manage how the telling sounds. She said it was dark and very hot. She said she could hear them laughing through the door. She said she kept calling for me, and nobody answered, and at some point she began to believe what Gloria had told her before they shut the door. That I wasn't coming. That this was just how things were going to be now. But you came, she said. I'll always come, I told her. That's a promise I will spend the rest of my life keeping. Kyle had set up the guest room at his place for us. He'd stopped at Target on the way home from my house and bought Ruby a pair of pajamas with stars on them, a set of colored pencils because he'd heard her mention drawing, and a box of Fruit Loops, because Amy had never allowed sugar cereals in the house. And Kyle wanted Ruby to have something that felt purely like a gift, with no rules attached to it. That night, after Ruby fell asleep with both hands, wrapped around a stuffed rabbit Kyle had found in the toy aisle, I sat at his kitchen table and opened my encrypted email. Rex had sent me 16 audio files. I thought I was prepared. I don't know why I thought that. The earliest file was from 4 months ago, Gloria's voice first, then Amy's. If Ruby keeps saying things at school, we're going to have a problem. She won't say anything if she understands what happens when she does. Amy, you're talking about your own daughter. I'm talking about a situation that needs managing. The word she used was managing, not Ruby's name, not my child, a situation. The second file was from 3 months ago. Bart's voice joined it. The trust paperwork. Shane's going to push for that eventually. Not if Ruby is in no condition for anyone to take seriously. If she's got documented behavioral problems, documented instability, then I have full discretion over how that money is used. The estate attorney was very clear about that. And Shane? The answer came without any hesitation. Shane travels, a lot, to some genuinely dangerous places. A pause. I've already made some changes to his life insurance, moved myself back to sole beneficiary, doubled the payout. He hasn't noticed. I stopped the recording and sat in Kyle's kitchen until the clock on the microwave read 1:14 a.m. Rex came in sometime after midnight. He'd been back at my house with the investigators going through additional materials. He poured himself a glass of water and sat across from me and waited. She changed my life insurance, I said. 18 months ago, Rex confirmed. He slid a folder across the table. Moved to sole beneficiary, removed Ruby entirely, doubled the payout. That same month, she started routing your travel assignments through a contact at your company's travel desk. Someone who owed her a favor. He paused. The assignments you've been sent over the past year, the remote locations, the one to the Eastern Tennessee quarry site, where there was that equipment malfunction in March. Those weren't random scheduling, they were selected. I understood exactly what he was telling me. I've already sent everything to the DA's office, Rex said. Properly documented. Chain of custody intact. All of it. He held my eyes for a moment. You're not the only one who learned patience in the service. The assistant district attorney's name was Allison Kreft. She'd been with Rutherford County for 14 years, and she had the specific stillness of someone who has learned to absorb terrible things without flinching in depositions. She listened to every audio file with her hands flat on the conference table. When the last one ended, she was quiet for a long moment. This is premeditated, she said, organized, over an extended period of time. She looked at me steadily. And the insurance policy changes, combined with the documented travel routing, will be filing additional charges around conspiracy. She didn't specify conspiracy to commit what. We both understood. Gloria was charged with child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment of a minor, and reckless endangerment. Bart faced the same charges, plus a separate count, once investigators discovered he'd been collecting Tennessee disability benefits for a back injury, while simultaneously working unreported cash contracting jobs on the side. The cousins who had been present in my living room faced accessory charges. Amy's charges took longer to build, but they were heavier. Conspiracy to commit child abuse, financial exploitation of a minor, fraud related to the insurance policy restructuring. And later, as Allison's office dug deeper with the help of a forensic accountant, conspiracy to commit murder. Investigators in Chattanooga had located a man with 2 prior fraud convictions who had been in contact with Amy over a period of 8 months and had been making inquiries about my work schedule and the locations of specific job sites. A transfer of $9,500 had already cleared from an account Amy controlled. She had paid a down payment. Justice, when it works the way it's meant to, is not dramatic. It's methodical. It's one thing after another, and then one more thing. Bart Schiller's disability fraud investigation began within 10 days. His benefits were terminated, and a demand for repayment of 3 years of fraudulent claims was filed. The criminal charges related to what happened to Ruby in that closet carried a mandatory minimum of 3 years. He received 5.5. Gloria received 6 years. She also lost custody of her own 2 children in a separate family court proceeding, after the Department of Children's Services reviewed the full evidence file that Rex had compiled. The cousins received suspended sentences and probation. Their names are now permanently attached to a criminal record involving child endangerment. I'll take that. Amy's trial lasted 8 days. Allison played every recording for the jury. She played the closet footage in its entirety. She called Dr. Yoon to testify about the bruises and the dehydration. She called the forensic accountant who walked the jury through Amy's financial maneuvering, account by account, transfer by transfer, from the first month after her mother's death until the day of Ruby's rescue. Amy's attorney argued psychological stress following bereavement and untreated postpartum depression. It wasn't a bad strategy. It might have worked if it hadn't been for 16 months of dated, time-stamped audio recordings in which Amy's own voice discussed, in clear and practical terms, the deliberate dismantling of her daughter's psychological stability for financial gain. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. When the verdict was read, Amy didn't react right away. She went very still. Then she turned and looked at me across the courtroom, and what I saw on her face was not remorse. It was calculation, the look of someone rapidly adjusting to new constraints. The judge sentenced her to 24 years. No early release consideration for the first 15 years, with the conspiracy to commit murder investigation still ongoing and additional charges possible. The judge said something I wrote down afterward, because I wanted to get it exactly right. You used your daughter's fear as a management tool. You invited other adults to witness and participate in that child's suffering as though it were a form of entertainment. And you did all of this with the deliberate purpose of accessing money that was supposed to protect that little girl's future. This court has rarely encountered a more calculated betrayal of the most fundamental human bond that exists. We will impose the maximum sentence available to us and consider ourselves constrained only by the law, not by our assessment of your character. The parental rights termination hearing was 3 weeks after sentencing. Family court, smaller room, fewer people. Ruby's court-appointed advocate was there. Her therapist, Dr. Finch, had cleared Ruby to attend and said the same thing good therapists say. Ruby needed to see that what happened to her was taken seriously by the adult world. She needed to see the door close, officially. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make a statement before the ruling. Ruby stood up. She was wearing the purple cardigan she'd picked out herself at Target. Her hair was in 2 braids that Kyle's wife had done that morning. She held a piece of paper with some notes on it, but she didn't look at it once. My name is Ruby Tate. I'm 7 years old. She paused, not from nerves, from deliberateness. I used to think it was my fault that my mom didn't want me. My therapist says it wasn't my fault. I believe her now. Another pause. I don't want Amy Tate to be my mom on any paper anywhere anymore. My family is my dad, and my Uncle Kyle, and Miss Marge from across the street who heard me and called for help. Those are the people who are my family. The judge looked at her for a moment before he spoke. That is one of the bravest things said in this courtroom in a long time, Ruby. She nodded once, satisfied with the outcome, and sat back down next to me. 8 months after the sentencing, Ruby and I moved into a rental house near Kyle's neighborhood in Brentwood. Big backyard. A sunroom that caught morning light. No closet under the stairs. Ruby had specifically asked me to check for that before we signed the lease, and I had gone through every door in the house before I said yes. On the first Saturday in the new house, Kyle brought over a charcoal grill. Rex brought potato salad. Marge made the drive down from Murfreesboro with banana bread and her reading glasses and a stack of library books. We ate in the backyard, and Kyle set up a sprinkler in the grass, and Ruby ran through it in her clothes, which I had not authorized and did not stop, and she laughed. The full body kind of laughing that little kids do when they've completely forgotten to be careful. I watched her from the back porch. Marge came and stood beside me with her lemonade. You know, she said, after a while, when I heard her through that fence, I almost talked myself out of calling. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a family argument. Maybe it wasn't any of my business. She shook her head slowly. I almost didn't call you. But you did. Yes, she said, I did. That's the part I come back to. Not the verdict. Not the recording of Amy's voice. Not the sentencing. I come back to Marge Dunning, standing in her rose garden on a 92-degree afternoon, hearing a child cry through a fence, and deciding that it was in fact her business. Everything else followed from that one decision. The financial forensics ultimately recovered $290,000 that Amy had diverted from accounts that were meant to form Ruby's education trust. The court ordered full restitution. That money is now sitting in a properly structured trust, managed by a neutral third-party trustee, untouchable until Ruby turns 21, as it should have been from the beginning. Amy's appeal was denied. Rex called me when it came through. I was in the car line outside Ruby's school, waiting to pick her up. I thanked him, hung up, and didn't think about it again. There are things that stop needing your attention once they're finished. Ruby came out of the school doors with her backpack on, and a drawing rolled up under her arm. She'd made it in art class. She climbed into the back seat and held it up so I could see it in the rearview mirror. A horse in a green field, a little rough in the proportions, but very confident in the color choices, which had always been her strength. Do you like it? She asked. I think it's the best one you've made, I said. She studied it critically for a moment. I think so too, she decided. We drove home. She talked about her day the entire way. Who said what at lunch? The book they were reading in class, the fact that her best friend had gotten a hamster, and Ruby felt strongly that we should also get a hamster, a negotiating position she'd been building toward for 2 weeks. That is the victory. Not the appeals being denied, not the sentencing this. If something in this story sounds familiar, if you recognize that child who stopped asking for help because asking hadn't changed anything, or if you're the neighbor who heard something and started to talk yourself out of it, please don't do what Marge almost did. In Tennessee, suspected child abuse can be reported to the Department of Children's Services at 1-877-237-0004, available around the clock. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline is available nationwide at 1-800-422-4453, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. If you are in a situation where someone is pressuring you to stay silent, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-800-799-7233. The people who hurt children count on your hesitation. Marge Dunning almost handed them mine. She didn't, and that made all the difference.